Hello everyone, and welcome to BHD Studios, and welcome to 100 Years of Leica. Now I'm going to do a special series this year's in celebration of Leica's 100 years of manufacturing cameras as well as lenses. By doing these, I'm going to call it Flat Lay 5, where I'll show 5 cameras and there's a connection between all 5 of them. And for this video, as you probably saw in the thumbnail, it's all about black paint. And so here we have the Leica 1A from, well, the Leica 1 came out in 1925. Now this specific model and this specific camera is not from 1925, but this is the first Leica ever made. And then we have the Leica M3, and then we have the M6 limited edition, and then we have the M9-P, and finally we have the M10-R. Now ideally I wanted the M7 black paint a la carte, and over here I wanted the latest and greatest M11 black paint, so then it'll be 1, 3, 7, 9, and 11. So all odd numbers, but I just couldn't get those cameras all at the same time and on time to shoot this video. And so this will have to do, this is representative of 100 years of Leica as well as black paint. Now to talk a little bit about black paint, some may be wondering, why are people so crazy about black paint? And it is because, well, I'll use this one here as an example. We like the patina. We like how it wears out, and as it wears out, which is actually an accident, it was never meant to wear out, but as it wears out, it's like a ripped pair of jeans, like an old leather jacket. It gives a sense of history that people have used it, and often when you grab a black paint camera and it was used and it wasn't yours, you kind of imagine like, what has the camera gone through with black paint? But in terms of collecting black paint cameras, I've been doing research on this for many years, and basically there's lots of history written on black paint in Japan, in Japanese magazines. None of them have been translated to English, but from what I gather over the years of me speaking to collectors, Leica collectors and people in Japan and people in Hong Kong and other places, is that basically the big wave of black paint collecting started with Japanese collectors in the 1970s and big time in the 1980s. Black paint was never meant to wear out, as I mentioned. For instance, this is the 1A here, and as you can see, this is closer to like a black enamel, and I think Leica actually called it black enamel, and all these have slightly different black paints, and this is more matte, and this is actually my favorite look of black paint. It just has the look that I like. But Japanese collectors, so there was an economic boom in Japan in the 1980s, and at that time people had a lot of discretionary money, and a lot of people started collecting Leicas. And Japanese love anything German, they love anything American. You think of Japanese denim, well, that's because they loved men's workwear of like the early 1900s. And if you look at where the most expensive, original 1800s Levi jeans are, they're like Japanese collectors are buying them. And so it's no wonder why Japanese denim is so good. They came to North America and bought up all the old roll stock of original Levi denims, and they have all the old looms, and it's just a huge industry. So in the 1970s and 80s, the Japanese started buying up black paint, which pretty much anywhere else, people didn't really like black paint. It just looked worn out. But there is a Japanese principle, sort of an aesthetic philosophy called wabi-sabi, and you've probably heard it, right? But there's basically like 4 sort of main ideas behind wabi-sabi, which is imperfection, impermanence, simplicity, and naturalness. So in terms of imperfections, the wabi-sabi talks about like flaws in things, asymmetry, and you look at Japanese pottery. A lot of the cups are kind of like almost look mangled and crooked, and even this table here, this open edge design has been popular in Japan for centuries, but in North America, you look at furniture in the last 100 years, it's always like oval or square, it's always perfectly shaped, but Japanese love wabi-sabi, right? They love this imperfection, they love the randomness of this all. In terms of impermanence, wabi-sabi talks about the aging process and change, like change changing of seasons as you get older, and the idea of a camera wearing out over time, it just works with the idea of wabi-sabi. Also the idea of simplicity, minimalism, things being rustic, things being humble. You know, a black paint camera looks humble, right? And even the design is very simple. And then finally, the idea of naturalness, raw and organic, being able to see the brass coming through the camera. So all these things work with the idea of wabi-sabi. So for a Japanese person, loving old American denim, loving, you know, old shoes, old leather jackets, bomber jackets, loving a worn out Leica just made a lot of sense. So Japanese were traveling all over the world buying up black paint cameras. And I remember even Mr. David Chan telling me in the 70s and 80s, Japanese collectors were coming to Hong Kong and they were buying up old Leicas, specifically hunting down black paint. And, you know, one of the most rare ones is a Leica MP, the original MP, like based on the M3 from the 1950s. And so once the Japanese started buying them all up, then they started becoming rarer. And as we get into the 2000s and the internet and kind of the resurgence of when film started shifting over to digital, people did start looking at old cameras, and images of these brassing cameras started appearing. And then the idea of wabi-sabi, as well as, you know, kids loving jeans that are already pre-ripped, loving jackets that already look pre-worn, shoes that look distressed, that started taking hold in the West. And as well as this kind of open edge tables that are asymmetrical. And all of a sudden, even people in the West started wanting black paint cameras. And so let's talk about the Leica 1A right here. Now, as you can see, look at the brassing all on the edge here. You can even see the brassing through the viewfinder right there. See all along the edge there. And all along here, it makes sense here because your hand is holding it here. So typically the brassing will happen all on the back edge and along the bottom as well. All through here. So this is, I think we looked this up, it's like a 1920. So 1925 is when this came out, and then the 1A probably came out a couple years later, but black enamel was the normal color. The idea of electroplating, the idea of chroming was still pretty new back then. So almost all German cameras that you think of, like early Zeiss, early Leicas, when they were black, they all started coming off like this, and that was just normal. Once they finally invented the chroming process, so both silver chrome and black chrome, all of a sudden it didn't wear out. And when they did invent black chrome and silver chroming, black paint was actually cheaper because it wore out faster. And when it wore out, it looked more used. And so people didn't want black paint. And because black chrome was more expensive, because it was a really in-depth process, in the early days, it was an 18-step process to do black chrome or silver chrome. Maybe now it's not that many processes, but it's a lot more labor intensive. And so black paint or black enamel was the cheaper finish. But right here, I mean, now that it's 100 years old, we kind of want it to look old, right? And so this brassing is kind of appropriate for a camera that's 100 years old. And when people are looking for these older Leicas, a lot of collectors will prefer the black enamel finish just because it basically is a black paint. And so Leica 1A. So now let's talk about this right here. The elephant in the room, the Leica M3 black paint. Now someone had asked me, Take, is that a real M3 black paint? Because there is a trend of basically making a non-black paint. So they're getting the silver chrome M3 and they're stripping it down and then black painting it. And who started doing it? Well, again, it was the Japanese. So as the global supply of black paint started disappearing, the Japanese thought, well, we still love the aesthetic of it. Why don't we just buy M3s and M2s and then figure a way of stripping off all the chrome plating and then bring it back down to the brass and then start painting it to the point now where some collectors, other than tracing down the serial number, will tell you by looking at it, they can't tell if it is real black paint or if it's some Japanese craftsman doing it. And so you can see right there, one of the things is the Japanese figured out how to make the black paint bubble. See that? It's kind of orange peel bubbling, and that typically was a sign that it was real black paint. But this one right here, this M3, it is not original black paint. And so JJ, the collector, I'll do a separate video on this, but this is a Shuedo black paint. So they are a company out of Taiwan. I think Kanto is probably one of the more famous ones, but Shuedo is also very famous where they will do any custom job on any camera that you send them. JJ was telling me that when he got this done years ago, it was like an 8-month waiting list, and now it's like a 3 or 4 year waiting list to customize your Leica. And so this one here was customized for JJ. This is the black paint, and he even got to choose how much it wore down. In fact, he says that he got them to do it over 3 times to basically remove more. He wanted it to look more natural. And you can also see the 50 mil rigid Summicron also was black painted. And just to reduce the glare, I did take the filter off, but as well, the filter has been black painted. So this is a pretty intense job. Again, I'll do a separate video on this camera here. JJ gave me the invoice. And so the cost, like you can buy an M3 silver chrome for, based on the condition, like $1,200 to $1,800. Well, he spent way more than that getting this black painted, the body, the lens, the filter, and the body cap, all black painted. So it shows you the enthusiasm for the M3 black paint. Now, when Leica first came out with the M3, it was only available in silver chrome. Again, it makes sense. It was way more durable. People complained about the paint coming off. People didn't want black paint. There was no black chrome M3. Black chroming on the M's didn't start until the M4. And so any M3 or any M2 that were originally black were black paint. And so the MP, the original M3, meant for photojournalists 1956, 1957. They only made like 138 of them. And they also came with the matching Leica Vit. And so you can imagine the holy grail of Leica M black paint is the original MP. I can even imagine what they're selling for, probably over $100,000. So for someone like JJ to spend thousands of dollars to get an M3 black painted makes sense. The MPs were made specifically for photojournalists, and it was slightly modified for photojournalists, but there were average people that didn't want the silver chrome. They also wanted, so there are regular black paint M3s as well, not the MP versions of it. And then there was black paint M2s, which went to 35mm frame lines, and in terms of black paint collectors, I think a lot of them prefer the M2 black paint. And then were black paint M4s, less rare. You can still buy them for anywhere between $8,000 to $12,000 today, which is cheap for a original like a pre-M5 black paint, but still quite expensive. So if you want an M3, M2, or M4 black paint, you would get an M4. I prefer the M4 anyways as an overall camera. So for me, if I was going to get a M3, M2, M4 black paint and I had the money, I would still get an M4, even though it's probably less rare and also it'll be cheaper to buy anyways. And then after the M4, Leica stopped making black paint. So the M5 and then Leica CL, there was no black paint version. They gave up on it. It only came in black chrome because again, like I said, it was not popular. People didn't like this look. And even the M4 II and the M4P that came out after, those had a zinc alloy top as well as the M6. Other than the limited edition models, they all came in black chrome. And because they use zinc alloy top plate, you didn't get brassing anyway. So Leica was pretty much done with black paint. But as I mentioned, in the 1970s and 80s, the Japanese collectors started buying them. And then over time, people realized, hey, these look pretty cool. Wabi-sabi. Let's start hunting them down. There was such a high demand amongst collectors to get black paint that Leica finally caved and started making M6s in limited models. So this is a Leica Historical Society of America, the LHSA, and you can see right here, it's a special edition, and this is when they were making cameras in Solms, Germany instead of in Wetzlar because they lost the factory in Wetzlar. And this is pretty high gloss. If you look at the finish, I was having trouble over here because it was so shiny. Now the MP version of the black paint, I think I heard some people say it is different than the regular M3 black paint because the M3 black paint was glossier. The one meant for the MP meant for photojournalists was a little bit more of like a lacquered black paint. But this is like a collector's black paint. It is like so shiny. It's maybe to me overly shiny. And you could see here, you can see a bit of brassing in the shutter lever right here. And I'm just looking around here. Yeah, no, this is still pretty good. You could tell that the sticker was removed, because again, you want this to brass, and if you just keep on rubbing it over time, and this is also another spot that it'll tend to brass faster, is when you have it here, because you hold it like this, so your hand's always here, and some Leica shooters will actually, the quick wind is this way, right? So you're basically running your hand along the edge here like that, so you can just go like that. So when you do this, over time, you will start brassing over here. So you can see a little bit of wear, but I don't see any brass showing through. So this is a pretty good condition. And here's a Voigtlander Heliar lens. And I think this is also a black lacquer with the brass lens. And I think that's why this lens is on here. So there are limited edition M6 black paints. And there are M7 black paints, but it never came out officially as a black paint model. You have to get an a la carte. And so I love my M7. I wish they made a black paint version, but again, in 2002 when the M7 was being produced, Leica still didn't really see a need for a black paint version because an M7 was a shooter's camera. It replaced the M6, and it was the era of film. People weren't buying the M7 to collect. People were buying them because photojournalists and fine art photographers, editorial photographers use the M7 as a work camera, and so there's no need to do that. And then in 2003 they came out with the new MP, and that was an homage. It kind of went backwards in terms of features, right? It kind of went back to the old way of making cameras. It didn't have the angle winder, it didn't have the larger shutter speed dial, and the MP came in black paint. So in 2003 was kind of the return of the black paint, because Leica realized, hey, people want black paint cameras. So this is the M6 Leica Historical Society of America limited edition black paint. Now here, let's move over here. We have the M9-P. It was the professional model of the regular M9. Now someone teased me saying that this is officially not black paint in terms of like a collector's model, because all M9s that were black paint, but the box does say black paint on it, and definitely it is more matte. If you look at something like this, see how shiny that is, and then look at this, it is more matte. But if you look up M9 black paint, and you can see people who really shot with it, it starts to brass and it looks beautiful. This is a pretty minty copy. Oh, right here, I can see it. Look at that. You see some brassing right on the edge right there. See that? A little bit of brassing on the edge. Right there you go. There's a brassing right there. But this is a black paint model. There was no black chrome M9. So because of it, all black Leica M9, M9Ps will brass over time. And of course, the M9 is kind of this weird collector's camera now. This does have the new sensor installed, and the sensor was made by Kodak. It was designed to mimic the look of Kodachrome. So the colors are really beautiful on this, and the value of the M9P in black paint has gone up over the years. So this is a really cool camera, and if you want a modern digital black paint, then this is probably the way to go. All right, my last black paint camera, and this is the M10-R black paint. Also has a black paint 50mm Similux, and so both matches, both is very shiny as well. In terms of the shininess, it reminds me a lot of the M6. See that? They're both like piano shiny. Right? So some people might not like it because it's a fingerprint magnet. I personally prefer the black paint either on the, well, really like black lacquer on the 1A as well as on the M9. But if you're a collector, this is what you want. Now the value of the M10R, like non-black, so either black chrome or silver chrome, is between $5,500 and $6,000 used. And that's actually pretty good considering the M11 now is selling for just a little bit above that. But if you look up the value of the M10R black paint, so when it was new, I don't know, was it like $1,000 or $1,500 more than the standard M10R? Now used, this is like $10,000, $11,000. So it's jumped up in value like $4,000 or $5,000 just because it's black paint. And so it shows you how people in the Leica ecosystem are just crazy for the black paint models. And for those that are like trying to protect it, I think it's crazy. I love seeing, especially on this 1A, I love seeing that brassing coming through, especially if you are naturally shooting with it and that's just what happens. But if I had an M10R, I would never protect it. I would make sure it starts to patina along where you would hold it mostly. So probably mostly in the back here, you'd get patina, and right along here naturally. And of course, along the edges here, you would get it. And you could see kind of. It's really hard to see. It's more matte. It's not worn out to the brass yet, but it's matte along this edge here. And so this is worth quite a bit, over $10,000 for an M10R black paint. And that's why I'm saying the new M11 black paint. It's only $200 more than the standard M11. I tell people for $200, either get the M11P because you're a shooter, or get the M11 black paint, which is basically an M11 with black paint. That's the only difference between the M11 and the M11 black paint, or they call it glossy black. Pay the $200 because my guess is when the M12 comes out, the M11 black paint will over the years start being worth more and more. So brand new, it's a $200 difference. I guarantee you used is already going to be a couple $100, maybe even up to $1,000 difference when it's used. And then 3 or 4 years, it'll be $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 difference because you have an M11 glossy black, or basically black paint. So this is kind of a quick, I say quick, but an overview of Leica black paint starting in 1925 with the Leica 1 and the 1A. And then when the M3 came out, it was a limited edition black paint, M2 black paint, M4 black paint, no black paint for M5, M42, M4P, M6, except in limited editions, no M7 black paint other than a la carte, and then the MP, the film camera, finally black paint, and then as you get into the digital M9 black paint, I think the M8 and the M8.2 also, the black one was probably black paint, and then the M10R black paint, and now there is the black paint for M11. So black paint is here to stay. Wabi sabi. I think Westerners have embraced the idea of asymmetry. They embrace the idea of imperfection, flaws, the idea of impermanence, things that are aging and changing. There's beauty in aging and changing. The idea of minimalism and simplicity. The design of this is very simple. I'm sure even someone like Dieter Rams can appreciate the iconic look of the Leica M cameras. And the idea of naturalness, raw materials, and seeing that raw brass showing through. I think it's great, and I would love to see Leica adding brass and black paint even to the Q series and the SL series. Even if it's going to be just a limited run, I would love to see even just the front of the Q series brassing, and the SL, Pat Domingo needs a brass black paint Leica SL3 and SL3S. And so thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you have any black paint stories down below, or what black paint cameras that you do have. Add to the whole idea of black paint, because you know there are black paint Nikon, Canons. I have a black paint Minolta. All the old cameras, even from the Japanese manufacturers, Canon, Nikon, Minolta, Pentax, and the German brands like Rollei, Voigtlander, Contax, they all had black paint as well. It's not just Leica. And so let me know down below what black paint cameras that you have that brasses nicely over time. And let me know which of these black paint cameras are the ones that I don't have are your favorite Leica black paints. But I hope to do a black paint, like I said, of a Leica 1, M3, M7, M9, and M11. So if you can help me, let me know and I'll love to do it. Or let me know if you have any other ideas of these flat lay 5 videos. What 5 Leica cameras can I bring here and we could talk about it. Alright, so thank you so much for watching. And what camera should we end off with here? Right here. We'll end off with the M6. Alright, so thank you so much for watching and happy shooting. Peace.